Greetings and welcome to AfroCoder, aka Designer Elise Square API booking system. So, since we're creating a system, that's going to take some time. So, we're going to break this down. Um, I will tell you that if you need to stand something up right now and you have Square and you want to use some booking, they do have this appointments booking, and there's a calendar. You can set up your availability. Has this online booking. You can embed it. Sorry, your site or whatever that you set up, and then you can embed it, and you can control all of these things. What you're ordering, what you can book, all of that stuff there. Now, it would be great if we could use this and then, or use elements of this and then pull from the appointments API into a custom solution. And that way you can have someone who's managing the back end from here, and all it's really doing is interacting with this here, right? Kind of an MVC situation. But that's not what can happen here because appointments doesn't have an API. In fact, if I click here, a lot of these don't have APIs, or the API only applies in certain circumstances. So specifically, like transactions is going to be an API everyone and anyone can access. There are methods to the classes in the transaction API that functions, methods that will let you create charges and view those charges, right? Reports, act, okay, on and on and on. Invoices, no API for that. Appointments, no API for that. The others, I'm not certain. Ooh, I wonder if there's a deposits API. I don't know, but I doubt it. But anyway, when this is not for you, you got to go the developer route. Okay, so you're going to click on apps. So once again, I just went to that main menu and clicked all the way down here. Okay, bottom apps, and you'll come here, and then you'll want to click on the left hand my apps. Okay, and then it'll have what you've done, what's important is these are pre-done apps by somebody else. You want to go over here to the right where it says build with Square and click on go to developer dashboard. Okay, and this is where all of the information that you will need to authenticate and access and interact with the APIs will come from. Okay, so I have some information here. It says my applications. I have a current application called website payments. If you don't have any applications here, you will need to create a new application. So let's just go there for you, right? I'm just going to put test. I'm not going to use this. But you're going to create a test application. Okay? And boom, it's been created. And now all of the credentials that you're going to need are going to be right here. But these test credentials, as you'll see, you're going to use your sandbox credentials, okay? So use your sandbox credentials, and under locations, they have sandbox location as part of your credentials too. So that's what you're going to use going forward when you're asked, okay? If you don't have this information, then you really can't go any further. So set up your Square application environment, okay, as a developer following those steps. Okay, now I have a real world project that requires this to happen, which is why I'm taking you along with me. All right, so let's look at my wireframes for what I'm building here. So we know it's a booking system. We talked about that. Okay, so I use Adobe Experience Design to wireframe out the experience, and then I'll layer over it the design. Okay, but we can work. I've done enough here that we can work to build and make it pretty and stuff as we go along. Okay, because right now I'm just worried about a certain functionality. So I'm going to hit play on this. It didn't start in the beginning. That's fine. All right, so this is what it would look like. It's it's mobile first, of course. So that's what we're looking at here. We're on step 1. So we're creating a booking here, filling in the event date and guest. Then there's packages that we could select, and it gives me my per person rate, which is much smaller, you see, than my total. So that's an important part, that they're able to see what the per person is, breaking down that total based on guests and showing the total later on. Okay, now what's important to know is this is the staff version. So when someone calls in, they will be the staff person will be taking their order over the phone using this. And what will happen is, as they use this interface, then we will develop the customer facing one based on the feedback from the staff, okay, in booking them. So we want the staff to experience the frustration first, because they can kind of work around stuff that the customer can't. Okay, so starting here, after packages, they decide, because the company uses deposits, right? Because obviously it's a big amount. Sometimes their stuff is far down the future. So we have a total, a deposit, and a balance, and as well as the due date for that balance, right? Okay. So that total is going to be charged to who? This customer. This customer information is very important. Specifically, this email and the billing address. Okay, because that is what Stripe uses to gauge whether they're going to offer you the umbrella of their protection from fraud or not. So you must, at minimum, always get the email and billing address. Okay, get all of this other information as well. Okay, payment information. This is where the Square API comes in, because we're going to capture this, but it's going to go into a token, right? So it's going to go into like a hash or some type of encryption, and then it's going to be sent over, and there's a whole smart system that Square has to recognize that payment and get your money. So all that happens in the background. So this is nothing but a form, okay, capturing all of that information with what we captured before. This is a review of that form. But all we're doing when we do this is we're submitting a form that's submitting that information we just collected. The payment information is being condensed into a nonce, or which is a number used once, right? So it's just for this particular transaction for a particular period of time, right? So it's going to go through and it's going to give a response. It, meaning Square's API, is going to return a response of whether it was successful or not. So our part one will lead us to a successful response the successful passing of the token. Okay. We then need to set up an MVC environment to really get the transaction information back and all this other stuff. Okay, but part one is going to remain simple. So I hit submit payment, and boom. Assuming I get an okay back from my PHP page that I used to process my payment that happened in the background, my user, my staff person, is going to get a confirmation. But again, what we're going to focus on today is this payment processing, and make sure that token is created in a form, sent to Square, and Square comes back and said, yes, we accept your token. Okay, let's do it. Now here I'm at WAMP server. You can tell by my taskbar down here, I have WAMP. That's what I use. If you are on Mac, there is MAMP. So you can see that first letter has something to do with the system that you are using. There's LAMP. I guess you could probably guess for Linux. Okay, so I'm on a Windows system and I'm using WAMP. Okay, so you will need to install it. It is pretty easy. You need to know whether you're operating on a 32-bit or a 64-bit. I'm not going to go through this here. There are plenty of videos that will do that, but you could pause this here if you don't have WAMP set up. But in order to use PHP, in order to have the web server, in order to interact the way we need to have a web server to do that. And as you can see, WAMP stands for Windows Apache MySQL PHP. Okay, I kind of jumbled that up there, but it's Windows, Apache, MySQL, PHP. So yeah, you need a database. What database you're going to use here is MySQL. All right, it's all free. It's easy to use and easy to set up. So I would tell you to start WAMP. Right. All right. Now the other thing you're going to need is some kind of coding editor. Okay. So I'm going to assume you already have one. Just in case you don't, I recommend Visual Studio Code. It to me, it's free, number one. But I do pay for things if it's absolutely necessary. But this is free. They have a paid version of course Visual Code, but or Visual Studio. But this one is everything that you would need. It's pretty smart. It's helpful, and you'll see as I go along and do things. So, assuming you have WAMP, your WAMP is over here and it's green. When you right click on, when you left click on your WAMP, you'll be able to see your directory, right? So we want to open up our www directory. And this is where we're going to be storing our stuff, okay? So I'm going to make a new one here, a new folder. So this is like a new website basically, and I'm going to call it Square Books. All right. Square Books is totally empty. But what I'm going to do now is going to go open a folder. So you can open a file, but I like to open a folder. And you're going to be under CWAMP, www. Here's my Square Books. I'm just going to select that. All right. Then it's going to load it, and I'll be able to add pages and stuff like that very easily. See, it's over here. On my other computer's on the right side, but that's fine. All right, so I could have new files, new folders. I can refresh stuff. I can collapse things. I can open them all, etc., etc. But here's my Explorer panel over here. Okay, and you'll see what I mean by things are smart. So here's what we first need to do. We already know that we need to build, and we're gonna minimize this so we can look at it from time to time, right? We need to build this payment info box because everything else is kind of built around it. All right, so let's go to Square. Now we have developer. You should be in your developer portal, as I was saying, with these credentials and stuff like that. All right. Now we have our documentation, right? What you can see is we have the general take payment, which is, in other words, charging, right? And they have the different ways to do this. So if you have in-person and in-app, you can build on top of that, but we're focused on online. Okay, so there's a payment form, there's transactions API, and checkout API. Okay. And then there's the other APIs you could be interested in. Feel free to explore these because some have a little bit of overlap. You'll see best use cases for using one or the other. We're going to go to the payment form. Okay, so I guess we could look here. Here is what we're building. This payment details where it captures your card number. It's telling you that it uses this Square SQ payment form library to render all of this information into a secure payment token. It's a nonce, okay? It says it uses the secure payment token, aka the nonce, with a server component built into this transaction API, okay, to charge the payment and then to come back and tell you yes, it went through, no, it didn't, so that you can make a complete web solution. Cool. So this right here is the base, and then we can build on top of that. All right. So build the form. All right. So what we're going to do is go to build the payment form. All right, and I like to look at my code and what I'm doing over here at the same time. Okay. So let's look at the requirements. So it tells me I have to use the Square hosted version of the Square payment form. So I can't store that locally. I have to use either if they have a CDN or it says their version. So their hosted version of whatever this Square payment form JavaScript library is. Um, we have to use HTTPS unless you're using localhost, which is if you're using WAMP, you're good to go because that uses localhost. Okay, but if you put it on any type of production site that is not a localhost site, not testing, then you are going to have to. It probably won't work. Okay. The sandbox doesn't support Apple Pay, so you can't do testing of that. You're going to have to do testing with small sums of money. I'm not using digital wallet, so you can go over there. Shipping address validation is only available for digital wallets that support address, blah, 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 in the UI. We're going to support it in the UI, but you still have to make sure you tie it in the way you're supposed to so that it recognizes it as the address. Even though it's talking about digital wallets there, it's still relevant to you since you need to capture that address, okay? And it tells you that the payment form will auto-populate except for that one CCV field if your if you have something stored, if you have a wallet or a card like stored in your browser or something like that, it'll fill it in, okay? But it won't fill in that CVV, so don't expect that. All right, here we go. We're going to do just the payment form, okay? And it says we have to download these payment form, all right, from GitHub. So let's go to GitHub. Oh, let's not do it like that though. All right, so we're in GitHub, which is where they store the information. And here's all of the files that go with basic, okay? So this is essentially the UI and everything that we need to create that payment box. Okay, well, theoretically, everything we need, just the skeleton. So we need to download all of this stuff, okay? Now it's time to build the page. We'll start with the head here. We'll go get the head tags we need, which is the JavaScript and the CSS for the form. So we'll go to raw, get this code here. All we got to do is copy and paste it. So over in the next screen in your editor, you're going to get yourself a new file and you're going to start your PHP, which for us is invoicing.php. So you'll need to create the CSS files and the JavaScript file, just the shell pages, so that you're able to get this. So we'll start with this CSS file here, basic, and go ahead and create it in Visual Studio Code. All right, so we've put the head in. Oops. And then here's all the raw. All right, I'll just go to my CSS here and paste that. Make sure it doesn't say any problems. All right, I'll go back and get the JS. Now, as we get the JS file, please pay attention to this application ID and location ID. This is what we talked about the sandbox earlier, where you're going to have to replace these two items with yours. So if you go to your Square developer portal, here's your sandbox application ID, and if you go to locations, you'll get one of the location IDs to use. So as we go through looking at the rest of this JS file, you can see that the application ID and location ID is required to initialize the payment form, right? And that initialization creates that nonce or that token, right? And then there's some checks that have to happen. One important thing to note here is it comes in as an iframe. and therefore it has all of these cases. Okay, but once this is, put into the JavaScript file, which we'll paste in right now, just go through, make sure there's no errors. So now let's check what we've done. We've added our page script to the head, all the scripts that are required, our JavaScript, our CSS thus far, we have added into our invoicing.php file. Check and check. So we'll save that. Okay, so now we're back on track. Let's go. So step 2 was to make sure we have our 3 links there, which we absolutely do. So we have the payment form library, we have the basic.js and the basic.css, okay, all part of that Square payment form. Okay, now we need excuse me, we need to actually continue to build out our PHP form. So we have to add the form HTML to our page. So again, very easy stuff here. We're just going to well, once again, let me go open this payment form and open payment form, GitHub, go get the HTML, right? This here. All right, and we probably need a container. So I'm going to build a div with an ID of container. Okay, most of the grid systems that I would use that anyway. All right, so we'll just paste in what we've already gotten, and I'm just going to tidy up here because I like tidy looking code. So just give me 1 minute. So let's go check and see what our form is looking like. Ooh, so here we go. Looking at invoicing, we got a problem here that I noticed the CSS isn't showing up. So let's see. We have our CSS. Let's look at the console there. That's a problem. Localhost.css. All right, so there should be localhost square, but I've got to change my relative links here. Save that. Ah, that looks better. But you might be saying, hey, now we've lost the inputs, the card number, the expiration, all of that stuff. Where'd that stuff go, Lise? Well, we didn't finish. We were on step 2. Sorry, step 3. So now we have to render this form. Okay, so there's 2 options here. One is, hey, if you just got the form in your page and you want it to show, you'll use this first script here, okay, which is what we're going to be using. All right. So, but if you were doing something like you had some steps to go through before you revealed the payment form, this one's not going to work for you. You are going to want to use the code here, which kind of hides. You'll program some JavaScript, on when to show it, when to actually build the form, because it won't build until you've completed those previous steps. So there's 2 ways to do it. We're going to use this top form here because we want it to show. So we'll copy this text and we'll paste it right into our invoicing.php right before the end of the body tag. Okay, so you'll just paste that in. All right, you don't need to change anything. All right, it's good to go. All right, and it's just listening the DOM to load. Okay, that's all. Just load the content. It's gonna load it in. It's not checking to make sure that there's a click event or anything that happens before it. Right, right. So Now that we have our script in there, let's refresh this and see what we've got. Now we have another little issue, but this is more about formatting. If I go there and inspect that, the form itself, and you have to be careful because this is an iframe. So it's going to have a head and some other stuff that isn't actually the thing. So you got to look at these closing tags and starting tags and kind of scroll your way up to the top to where you see where the form actually begins. So remember our container? Well, it comes right after that, and it's form container. And if you look over here at under the properties for the CSS, I'm looking at the square itself, and I don't see any top anything. So I'm gonna come over here and say, hey, something doesn't look right on my form. It's not on the form. The problems aren't the fields themselves because there's not even CSS being applied to it. So it's definitely what's going on with this container. So as I suspected, when I get rid of that transform 50%, that's part of the problem. The other problem is it's positioned relatively, but it has a top. It's not absolute. It's not. So it's just weird formatting that you might have to fool around with. I don't know if this is for anybody, but I'm going to my CSS, my basic.css, and I'm just going to comment out the code just in case some weird stuff happens later on and I don't remember what I did on form container. I'll be able to see that I took this off. So I saved it. Let's see how this works now. When we refresh, boom, everything is loading. It looks really good. And now we can continue. In the console, we don't have any errors. There's nothing going on. So we need the credit card. Well, we need to be able to do the testing, right? Hey, but before we do our testing, we need to go in and fill in our application ID and our location ID. So let's go ahead and get those two items so we can actually test the form for real, for real. Okay, so back in our developer portal, we need this sandbox application ID. See that application ID? Then there's location ID, which we'll look at in a moment. But right now we're getting our application ID. All right, from the credentials, and it says sandbox application ID. So we'll go back to sandbox application ID. It's under credentials. We'll copy this and we'll go back to our JS file, and where it had at the top to replace me, let's start to replace that application ID. All right, so we'll go in between the double quotes, copy that in there, make sure there's no spaces. And now let's go get our location. So we want sandbox locations down here. Right, and you can pick any one of these. One is San Francisco, one is New York City, and one is cash only. All right, so we're going to use the San Francisco. So we'll copy this location ID here. All right, again, this is just for testing. It's sandbox. We'll copy that and we'll go paste that once again into our JS file. So we put in the application ID. Now we have to put in the location ID. Okay, so we're going to paste that between the double quotes. All right, and I see a space here, so we need to get rid of that space. Good, let's save it. Okay, so now the two requirements of application ID, which if you look, it's identical to what we have over there. Don't use this test application ID at the top. If you do, that's your real production one, and it will charge a card. So please only use the sandbox. So we've made it to step 5. Hopefully your step 5 is where I'm at with step 5. Okay, so we put in the application and location ID. All right. Now we need under step 6, it tells us we need a form action parameter. Okay, so we do need the card number, but before we do that, this is the PHP page, okay, that is going to do the actual processing in the background when you hit pay now. All right, so let's go back to our let's go back to where we code. And remember that when we hit pay now, we need to create the PHP page that goes and does the work in the background when we hit that pay now, before the confirmation page comes back, right? Okay. So going back to our code, we now have to create a PHP page that does the processing. So we're going to create one called charge. And you see here's the charge. All right, and right now we just need it to say, hey, everything went okay. So we're just going to put an echo to echo out, you made it. Okay? And I don't have to put the ending here, but I like to, since this whole thing is just going to come out anyway. So here you made it. Okay, so if everything goes right and we get the sign that you made it, okay, then we know we processed everything correctly. So we're getting to like the final lap here, guys. All right, so this is what's going to help create that token that's going to come back, process this PHP page, and give us an A-OK. All right, so let's go. Now we need the credit card number. Okay, so it's important is there's only one credit card number that you can use. Other places like Stripe, there's a whole bunch of them, but this one is different. You would put in all the use cases of wrong cards by putting everything other than the correct card number in here. If your page, by the way, doesn't look like mine, you can go ahead and start troubleshooting the payment form. I'm just going to put in random numbers so you can see where the errors come from. And now we will need to make these errors much more graceful. But you can see when you put in the wrong credit card number and the wrong stuff, it'll say credit card number is not valid. All right? So there are alerts right now, which you, again, we'll want to make pretty, but right now we're just testing. Okay? So later on, using the CSS and JavaScript, we can access it. But for right now, we're going to get the card number. Note that the postal code is 94103. Any non-consecutive 3 digits for the CVV, and any valid expiration date, any date in the future. Okay, so let's go paste this number in. I have to put in the right postal code, right? And look what I didn't do. I didn't save my new processing page. So I created my charge.php, but I didn't update it in where my HTML form is. Okay, so I got to go back to invoicing.php, and here where it says, look here, it told me that under my form ID, under the action, I need to change that to my correct page. Okay, so over here, I have to make this my charge page. Okay, so it's charge.php for my action. If I save that, I should be able to rerun this and everything should work out gravy. Now when we put in the correct card number, a good expiration date, a non-consecutive 3 in the 94103, hit pay. See what happened here. I think I just didn't save. So I saved again. I put the card number in, expiration one more time, CVV 94103, and woo! Looky there, we made it. So that's going to bring us to the end of part 1. Now you may be saying, well, Elise, what exactly is it processing? And that would be an excellent question. And that's for next time. Because if you notice, we were processing $1, right? So you pay $1. So next time we're going to build out the form so that we have control over this, and we build out the rest of the form to include the customer information and some other things. Okay? That'll be coming up in the next part. Have a wonderful day, guys.